Hello again. Welcome to another edition of Media Watch. I'm your co-host, Eric Tate.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
I'm Bob Anthony.
Alan Singer.
Educator, historian, Dr. Alan Singer, regular Media Watch. Glad to have you with us once again. And long trip, Japan, but you made it back safe. Glad you're here.
Didn't want to miss the show.
Fantastic. On this, the Wednesday, what is this? November
20th.
November 20th, before what should be our Monday airing on Manhattan Neighborhood Network, brought to you by EVT Educational Productions, Zoom, and will air sometime, either next Monday on MNN, definitely YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. We'll let folks know. Not going to get into blow by blow on what's going on as far as cabinet picks right now. I think we'll have time to get into that issue, but we need to take a broader look, and that's what we're going to do. It's called Media Watch. We're going to take a look at warnings and initiatives that media, journalists in particular, need to gear themselves up for a fight that's already in progress. And so, Bob, background on the video we want to take a quick snippet of so that our viewers know what it's set for.
Sure. We're about to show you a brief clip, maybe a couple of minutes, well, maybe a minute and so, with Sheila Coronel. She's a professor at the Columbia Journalism School. She's from the Philippines. She's an award-winning journalist, I'm sure. I can't rattle out the awards right now, but she recently posted a very interesting and widely shared video shared among journalists about how to deal with autocracies. And she points out that, as much as there might be some hyperbole, we're not in a autocracy at the moment, but there are a lot of tips learned from covering autocracies that are valid right now in the light of this most recent election. So I'm going to see if I can pull it up right now. And Eric, you can let me know when to take it off. But I think if I run the first couple tips, it will be
that'd be good.
It will be useful. I fell off the top of my screen for a second. I have to get it back. And
but yeah, Sheila Coronel,
here we go.
I believe, was practicing journalism at the height of the Duterte regime in the Philippines, if memory serves me correct, and faced all kinds of serious problems from the government while she was practicing her profession, speaking truth to autocratic power. So she has to say is definitely worth listening to.
And let's see.
I'm a professor at the Columbia Graduate School of Journalism. I'm originally from the Philippines, and in my career as a journalist, I've reported during dictatorships and also reported on populist governments that followed. I have culled some lessons from my journalist friends and put together a list of 10 tips for journalists reporting in autocracies. The United States is not an autocracy, but maybe there is something that American journalists can learn from what we have experienced. Lesson number 1, do not normalize. When the autocrats' actions and behavior are beyond the pale, when they are outside the norm and unacceptable, say so. Lesson number 2, do not demonize the autocrats' supporters. Listen instead to what they are really saying. Understand where they are coming from before you judge. Telling them they are stupid or misinformed will not help. Number 3, refuse to amplify anti-democratic voices. We know hate and rage go viral. Resist the temptation. Lesson number 4.
Okay, Eric, I'm going to stop the video, Eric, because it runs a little longer. But viewers can find this, as you can see, at the Columbia Journalism Review page on Instagram. You can just run the words together, Columbia Journalism Review, and it's close to the top of the of that feed. But it's an excellent 10 tips for journalists dealing with the current situation. And like I said, a widely shared video among journalists. We actually tried to get her on the show, but she's so busy normally, that she couldn't possibly make it.
We tried to get her years back when she first got here from the Philippines, if memory serves me correct, Bob, because we ran into her at a conference in Lower Manhattan some years back, and we said, we need to have this lady on our show. But anyway, the key phrase at the very top of her 10 tips was, do not normalize. Do not normalize. And basically, that's what we've been saying on Media Watch since before the election date. We were talking about, why are we normalizing this so-called presidential election as if it's normal when we have this 34 felony convicted sexual assaulter, convicted whatever, as the top of the ticket for a pseudo political party, which we have been guilty of normalizing, because the Republican Party is not a valid political party, as I've been saying all along. They normalize bad anti-democratic behavior. They practice anti-democratic behavior with their voter suppression techniques. Alan, this whole historical perspective, you are a key resident historian. Give us a little bit on not what we're going to be talking about for journalists to stand up, but this election that just went by, just so we can put what we have to do in perspective.
Well, the first thing is that Trump does not have a mandate. He had—
Say that again loudly.
Trump does not have a mandate to carry out his agenda. He
Thank
got
you.
49% of the popular vote.
What was that? 49%?
Harris got 48%. So it's a very divided nation. It's not a Trump nation. I think that's the first thing we need to know. The second thing is, if you look at presidential elections since 1948, what we have is Truman is a Democrat, Eisenhower's a Republican, Kennedy and Johnson are Democrats, Nixon, Ford are Republicans, Carter, Reagan, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, Biden, Trump. We have a nation which is going back and forth, largely because the problems brought about by globalization, the presidential parties have not been able to successfully address. So that the Democrats lost this election because people were unhappy with their inability to address the problems of COVID and globalization is not a Trump mandate. And if that pattern continues, Trump's inability to address those things are going to be, the Democrats are going to win the next election. So I think we're going back and forth. The issue for the Democratic Party is, does it move to the center more, become a more conservative party, or does it do what FDR did in 1932, where it put together a liberal coalition that is committed to finally addressing the inequalities in American society? And I think that's going to be the big fight for the Democrats. Which way do we go? Do we go like Bill Clinton and become even more moderate, become the Republican Party that used to be, or do we put together a real working class coalition that Bernie Sanders and AOC have called for and present a new deal to finally address inequality in the United States?
So here's my question about addressing inequality. The Democrats under Joe Biden did more for the American public to address inequalities. That infrastructure bill, the whatever reduction act, I forget what the unwieldy name of the goodie package was. It was such a non-magnetic name. It had no legs, despite the fact that millions of dollars were pumped into red states that provided new jobs, a lot better economy for those red states during the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration. So the fact that the Democratic Party was able to get that bill through a divided Congress to benefit the American people paid them absolutely no dividends on this past election. So, Bob, Ray, what's the problem with messaging, or is it more than just the economy? Because I've got my own personal take on that, but I won't get into that yet. Ray.
The economy is a huge factor for everyone across the board. But a lot of it, as you said, as we've said time and time again, it's the fear mongering, it's the condemnation of everybody that speaks out against him. And added to that is the fact that journalists, for the mainstream media, for the most part, has not really come down on him. Yeah, they report about, oh, he said this stupid thing today, blah, 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 blah. But we haven't really attacked the meat of the problem of who this man really is, what his intentions really are, and what the outcome of his intentions will be if he's able to carry them out. I think I hate to say it, but I think mainstream media has been a little soft on it.
I think, yeah, I agree with you, Ray. I think we could have been a little more muscular. And Trump has been good at hyperbole. He has been great with the insults, and he can come up with the 2 or 3 word slogans that everybody remembers, even though they don't actually mean anything, to sell his point.
There is a problem here. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to tap into that. But he's able to, because there is a problem, and we're the mainstream media again is not talking about the real problems. They're talking about the effect of everything, not the substance of everything. That's the way I see it.
I kind of see it as if the media is counterpunching instead of doing the punching. We're waiting for the punch, getting hit, and then having to counterpunch. And by that time, the stupid point, whatever point that the new president, the upcoming president, made, sells. But yes, there's a deep problem here, and we all know it. All of us are, neck deep in journalism. We know the industry needs to upgrade.
Yeah.
I think part of the problem is the difference between long-term and short-term. The Biden infrastructure programs were long-term plans to address the U.S. economy. But people vote based on short-term issues, not long-term. They don't say, wow, that program will help me 6 years from now. But people are voting because food prices are up, they can't afford homes, they're falling into debt. So and that happened, that's why George Bush 1 lost in 92. And that's why George Bush 2 lost in 2008, because people vote based on short-term economic issues, not based on long-term. And I think that because the short-term economic issues were not good, Trump succeeded in getting people to place blame on who they thought were causing this. So it was the woke programs, it was the immigrants, it's the criminals. So essentially racist attacks resonated with voters, with white voters, because the economy they didn't experience it doing well.
Okay, I agree with you on that. I also agree with you on all of you on the fear factor, the racist factor. I saw a report on PBS about a Texas county that flipped from Democrat to Republican. And it turned out that it was a conservative Catholic majority of voters that actually fell in line for the Trump anti-LGBTQ assault. The fact that they flooded the airways with the fact that Kamala Harris is for them, and they're going to destroy your life and your children's life, and your girls are going to have problems in bathrooms and whatever the crazy anti-LGBTQ, that got to the heart of Catholic conservative religious fear, just like the evangelicals love Trump because they think he's going to make Israel the second coming of the rapture or whatever reasons, they ignore the fact that he's a sexual assaulter, the fact that he actually came off a bus saying you can grab women by their private parts. They voted for him twice, put him over the top twice, and they were a big factor. Yeah, I agree with everything you guys have said. And I still want to break down those numbers, because if Joe Biden won the bulk of the popular vote against Trump, that meant Joe Biden won the bulk of the white electorate against Trump. And so for me, if we dissect all those numbers, it always comes down to a white male getting the maximum votes from white electorates. I don't care whether the white male is Donald Trump or the white male is Joe Biden. But Alan, what were the numbers of the actual popular vote that Biden had and Trump had, and that Trump had and Kamala Harris had?
Well, again, that's what struck me. Trump has a very solid base of support. In 2020, he got 74 million votes. In 2024, he got 76 million votes. It went up, but didn't go up that much. The bulk, 8 out of 10 of the Trump voters are white. He got about 60% of the white vote, which is not that different to Harris and Biden. He got a slight increase in Black and Latino vote, but that wasn't the big deal. Interestingly, a majority of women did vote for Biden and for Harris, but Harris's percentage of women went down, and a majority of white women did vote for Trump.
Both elections.
In both elections.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think the key thing that happened here, in 2020, Biden got 81 million votes to 74 million for Trump. Harris got only 74 million votes. The Democratic vote total went down by 7 million votes. It's not so much that Trump went up, it's that a lot of people just didn't go to vote. And again, I think in 2020, people went to vote against Trump because they were unhappy with the Trump administration. In 2024, people stayed home. They couldn't stomach voting for Trump. They stayed home because they were unhappy with the Biden administration's inability to address their problems. That's why I'm saying he doesn't have a mandate.
Yeah. So let's come back full circle, because even though we're going to wait for another show to dig into these cabinet picks, the fact that the Republicans, including the Speaker of the House, is, quote, pushing this, quote, we have a mandate. Donald Trump has a mandate from the public, so we're going to give him everything he wants. We're not going to release the ethics report on Matt Gaetz so he can get Matt Gaetz as the Attorney General. We're not going to, you understand where I'm coming from. So what does the Senate, which has no power over the House, but they do have to advise and consent on these nominations, let's just deal specifically with their charges and what they have to do. The only way he can get everybody he wants is if the Senate agrees to his demand that they go into recess, correct? Mm-hmm. If they go into recess for more than 10 days, he can have recess appointments for every cabinet position he wants. Correct, Alan, as historian?
That's correct. There's also some discussion of whether the president can force a recess. You know, when Obama was president, what the Republicans did to prevent a recess appointment is they didn't close the Senate. One person every day showed up to speak. It was a fraud. It wasn't open, but that's what they did. They never closed the Senate.
Technicality.
Yeah. The question is whether the president can forcefully close the House, and cancel it. And that's what Trump is exploring. He said, I will be a dictator on day one. If he can force the suspension of Congress temporarily, he can just appoint everybody as dictator on day one.
Let me ask you a historical question. In my study of the checks and balances, I've never come across anything anywhere that says the executive branch has a power to do anything about opening or closing any House branch of Congress. Where is he trying to hang his hat for making that happen?
Well, the second clause of Article 2, Section 3 of Congress authorizes the president to convene or adjourn houses of Congress in certain circumstances. Now, presidents have frequently summoned the houses for special session, but they have never ordered the adjournment. It'll be challenged in the courts, but it could be read that he has a right to adjourn it. It's never been done.
But the provision is sitting there. The word adjournment is in there, and that
Yes.
by itself worries me a lot. because
Yep. I was asking
just-
what he was going to hang his hat on, and that phrase does seem to be open to interpretation. Special circumstances, correct? Is that the phrase?
Yes.
Okay, so who's going to define a special circumstance?
And if the Supreme Court defines it, they're going to be in his corner.
Yeah, well,
But here's
Possibly, probably, but you know what? Sometimes they actually rise to the occasion, sometimes. So, but the question is the definition of a special circumstance. That is a very amorphous phrase.
he is talking about saying the United States is under attack, we've been invaded, and that will give him military power under a law that dates from the 1790s.
The martial
I
law,
have-
the
I
ability
have the
to do a martial
constitutional
law.
provision here.
Mhm.
In Article 2 of the Executive Branch, Section 3, he shall from time to time give to Congress information of the state of the Union and recommend to their consideration such measures as he shall judge necessary and expedient. He may, on extraordinary occasions, convene both houses or either of them, and in case of disagreement between them, respect to the time of adjournment, he may adjourn them to such time as he shall think proper. He has that power. It's never been done. But if he declares a state of national emergency because the United States has been invaded by undocumented immigrants, that would give him the authority, a special occasion.
So somebody has to define invade, and somebody has to agree that it's indeed an emergency. And that somebody would end up being the Supreme Court.
Right. The Supreme Court could rule, but he's got a 6-3 majority on that court. And
Well,
I can't see them standing up with any backbone saying this is a executive power that is not merited.
speaking
I
of
think-
backbone, what
I-
about the Senate on, well, yeah, he will push for his extraordinary circumstance and try to force a recess, is what you're saying. So-
And he will declare a he will.
But can any member of the Senate gavel the session open? Doesn't have to be the leader, does it?
I don't believe it's going to be up to the Supreme Court.
No, here's my point. When the Republicans pull that gambit, any member of the Senate, or it could be either house, right?
Yeah.
The House or the Senate. any member could say, hey, I want a session.
He would declare it illegal because he's adjourned Congress, and then it would be up to the Supreme Court.
Okay, so it's going to end up as a legal fight if he tries to do what he's going to probably try to do, and it's going to end up probably in the Supreme Court. Whatever trick he tries, whatever counter trick is tried, going to end up in the Supreme Court. That's basically what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
That's really troubling. I mean, the
Oh,
fact that
it's
it goes back to that court.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry to talk over you, Ray, but we have 2 minutes left.
Okay. So one of the things I wanted to touch on, but I don't have Richard Prince's journalism column in front of me because I was thinking I was going to call up the Sheila Coronel thing. But a bit about journalists standing up to report accurately is being under fire across the globe. But Prince reported that the bureau chief in Gaza of one of the news organizations was given a National Press Award. Do you remember who gave that bureau chief an award in Gaza? And part of the reason was because
I'm going to try to pull it up.
Okay, because of what's going on, the Committee to Protect Journalists and a couple of the other journalist organizations have been up in arms about the fact that the IDF in Gaza is not allowing journalists to actually do their jobs. And one of the Al Jazeera bureau chiefs' family was killed by an IDF bomb. And after he did whatever, he went back and opened up his bureau and continued to report because.
And just to get his name in before we run out of time, Al Jazeera's Gaza bureau chief, Wael Al-Dahdouh, is the National Press Club's 2024 International John Aubuchon Press Freedom Honoree. Go ahead, Eric.
I'm glad you called up his name because
we're just about out.
And he just said, okay, I've got to go back to work because we don't have enough people in the field covering what's going on here. And the Committee to Protect Journalists and National Press Club and all these other organizations are incensed about the fact that Israel will not let any foreign journalists into Gaza.
Okay,
So
and we're just about out.
Well, okay, this has been Media Watch, folks. I'm your co-host, Eric Tait.
I'm Raymond Peterson.
Alan Singer.
And I'm Bob Anthony. Catch up to us on YouTube at Media Watch EVT.